Has been in practice as a psychotherapist for 30 years in Teaneck, New Jersey. Legally blind from birth, he has specialized in helping children, adolescents, and adults adjust to vision loss. He has presented workshops, lectures, and keynote presentations in the United States, Canada, and Mexico at conferences sponsored by such organizations as NOAA, the National Association of Social Workers, and the Association for the Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind and Visually Impaired, as well as many state and private agencies serving the blind and visually impaired. Father Jim has been married for 38 years. His wife, Marie, is a special education teacher in the public schools in New Jersey. Their son, Dave, is an artist who lives on the West Coast with his family, and their daughter, Amy, is an entertainer living in Los Angeles. Father Jim enjoys reading classical music and is a 6th degree black belt in
karate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, beloved moderator. That's wonderful. Hello, and welcome to our little conversation on adjusting to vision loss and difference of appearance. I'm glad that you could be here. How you guys doing today? Okay. Welcome to the dreaded second workshop after lunch. So if you want to snore a little bit, that's okay. I'm not offended. I preach sermons on Sunday. Everybody does. You know what I mean. I am not a person with albinism, although I've worked in the albinism community for a while. I am legally blind. I have been visually impaired since infancy with retinopathy of prematurity. That means I was born way too early. That left my right eye totally blind and my left eye with vision of about 20/400. In midlife, thank you God, I'm so grateful, I developed acute close-angle glaucoma. My doctors said, it's wonderful when you see specialists. Apparently I'm only the 4th reported case in the literature of somebody with ROP developing acute glaucoma in midlife. It's wonderful. You can get appointments with any doctor you want and there's nothing they can do for you. It's just amazing. Although they're sweet souls. So the vision in my sighted eye deteriorated from about 20/400 to about 20/1000. Then a couple of years ago, you know, it's interesting when you go to certain physicians, there are things that you don't want to hear come out of the physician's mouth. You ladies, if you go to your OBGYN, you never want to hear them go, that's a bad thing. Or you don't ever want to hear your dentist go, oops. And I heard my specialist go, oh. I said, what's the matter? And apparently I had a couple of rapidly developing cataracts. So I recently underwent cataract surgery, which for a regular person is a no-brainer, but for me was very anxiety-provoking because it ran a 50% chance of total blindness with a retinal detachment. I came out fine, by the way. The cataract's gone. We're hoping it stays bye-bye for a while. So, I mean, that's just, so I have been raised, I was raised as a child who was visually impaired. I have been to every kind of educational institution except a residential school for the blind. Skipped that one. I started out in a parochial school and was not actually properly diagnosed until I was 10 years old, and that was a real problem. I then went into a self-contained class for children who were visually impaired, which actually saved my life. I would not have a life if that hasn't happened. Come on in, come on. And then I was what would now be called mainstreamed. In those days, we thought of it as just being up the creek without a paddle. Okay, let's just drop the little visually impaired kid into the school and see if he can swim in the deep end. And that was a problem. And then I was mainstreamed with what now would be called a resource room teacher or a tutor. I didn't have her nearly enough, but we solved that problem. My mother had died when I was 6, and my father met and fell in love with the tutor, and so they got married when I was in high school. So I had a full-time tutor then instead of just one day a week, and it worked out way better for me. And since they've had 4 kids since, I think it worked out way better for them too. So we're really pleased with that. We want to talk for the next hour or so about what's involved in adjusting to vision loss, okay? First, I want to offer you sort of a schema, a way of thinking about things, a template, okay? And then I want to work with you to help apply it either to your situation or the situation of your children, or, as I've said to many people who've been in this room, I know that some of you are here not because this is the workshop you would have chosen, but you have this friend. And this friend sent you here to ask questions, you know? And so I want you to ask all the questions that your friend needs the answer to, okay? If I have an answer, I'll give it to you, or I'll try to refer you in that direction. By the way, the little thing I have around my shoulder is called a voice note. I don't get a kickback from the company for advertising this thing, but it's the sweetest little piece of technology I've ever had in my life. It's like the best Palm Pilot or the smallest laptop you'd ever have. It only weighs about 5 pounds, and you can download books into it, you can word process with it, you can do email. I just love it. I bought one of the first ones. It's from New Zealand that you could get in the US, and it died recently, so I had to get a new one. So, a voice note, okay, and they're very cool sorts of things. They speak in that computer voice. My wife can tell if I've been reading in the afternoon. I say, "Hi, honey, what would you like for dinner?" She said, "Oh, I've been using the deck talk voice again, huh?" "Yes, dear." You know, either that or I come from France, but that's another illusion, okay? Somebody gets the conehead illusion. Okay, people under 30 get the conehead illusion. That's good. Okay, now I'm going to just going to give you a fast schema in terms of talking about vision loss. The very best book I have ever seen to understand the implications of vision loss is called Self-Esteem and Vision Loss by Dean Tuttle. Dean and Naomi Tuttle, Tuttle. Dean is himself blind. His wife's a nurse. It's in about 4 or 5 editions. Again, I don't get a kickback, but if you're going to read one book on adjustment to vision loss, this is the book to read, okay? Self-Esteem and Blindness. Self-Esteem and Blindness and Vision Loss, actually, is the whole title. And the subtitle is Adjustment with Vision Loss. And Dean and they talk about, I had lunch with the kids, and you know how that goes. Dean talks about 2 phases, and they're very important. When you experience vision loss, first you have to adjust to the vision loss, to being visually impaired, okay? Until you adjust to being a visually impaired person, you are a sighted person in drag, and that is a problem, okay? Because a sighted person who can't actually see that well is pretty much in trouble. Once you accept and acknowledge the fact that you have a visual impairment, okay, I am a person with a visual impairment, then you can learn all the skills and techniques and adaptations that are available to us, which are wonderful these days. You know, they don't give us vision, that would be better. But visually impaired people can do all kinds of things. My favorite activity is, the story is to talk about the summer I went to a program called Ski for Light. It's a program that teaches blind and visually impaired people to ski. Okay, cross country. There are blind downhill skiers, even we think they're crazy. Okay? And the motto of Ski for Light is, if you can do this, you can do anything. And it's a great program. You have to be, I think, over 21 or at least over 18. I commend it to anybody who's interested. Having adjusted or working to adjust to vision loss, then you can adjust into a larger life as a person with vision loss, okay? You can try and, make something of yourself. But it sounds like it's an intellectual distinction, and it isn't. I had a woman brought to me who had been blinded in surgery. She had been on her couch for 2 years. She was as depressed as any human I've ever seen in my life that wasn't in a psychiatric institution. And I said to her, "So what have you been doing for the last couple of years?" And this lady who was totally blind said, "Watching television." Okay, you know that large river in Egypt, the Nile? She'd been spending a lot of time wading in the water. Okay, and so I started to do my clinical interview, and I talked about her vision loss and about being blind. And she became enraged. And she said to me, "I'm not blind, I just can't see." And I thought about it, and I said, "You're right. You're not visually impaired till you say so. But until you say so, you're in a lot of trouble. Because there isn't anything you can do but sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Once you decide that it's okay for you to be visually impaired, you can get your life back. She was very furious. But actually, within the next 3 years, she got her life back. She went back to work as a word processor at a bank in New York City, traveling independently on the subway. Okay? My favorite was the day she came in with a white cane folded in her purse. She said, "Look what the blind commission gave me." And she showed it to me. It's interesting. I happen to know the young O&M instructor. He was a wonderful lad. God rest his soul, I buried him last year. He died an early death from cancer. He was a pistol, but he was a newbie, okay? And anybody who's had an O&M instructor that's a newbie, it takes a little patience. They're delightful. And she said, "You know what he told me when he gave me this thing?" I said, "What?" He said, "Your cane is your friend. Your cane will take you places that you want to go. You need to learn to love your cane." And then she said stuff that I cannot repeat because there's a video camera going. Okay? It was really bad. And I said to her, wanting her to use it, I said to her, trying to think of a way that I might entice her to use the cane, I said, "Did he give you that for free or did you have to pay for it?" And she said, "He gave it to me for free." And I said, "Oh, and you said he's new?" "Yeah." I said, "How many of those do you think you'd have to break before he got in trouble with his supervisor?" And she smiled. And I knew I had a customer. And I took it out and I said, "You know, the best way I know to break this is to just swing it back and forth in front of you like this. You know, finding all the dog poop you can find in the world and hitting your neighbor's children if you can." And she smiled. Now, why did I do that? Because she was very angry, okay? I needed to engage her anger. Well, she didn't hit her neighbor's children, and she didn't find much dog poop. But she went through 6 or 7 canes. By the way, I quickly called the supervisor and told him what I had done so this kid wouldn't get in trouble. Okay? So she then began, once she could accept the state of her condition, to get back into the kind of life that she wanted to live. Now, here's the kind of things that people who are visually impaired experience, okay? Kind of emotionally and psychologically. And not everybody experiences all of it all of the time, but most of us experience some of it much of the time. Make sense? And to kind of understand, first of all, that it's kind of normal. It's pretty normal. And once you understand what's going on, then you can figure out what to do with it. And when we think of phases, don't think of like a step ladder where you go from step to step to step to step to step. Think rather of a spiral staircase, where looked at one way you just keep going round and round in circles. And in another way you make progress up the staircase. You see what I mean? So we go through the same things over and over again, but hopefully at more and more adaptive levels. Now, physical and social trauma is the first thing that happens. Now, in the albinism community, mostly that trauma belongs to parents. Okay? Little baby's born, they don't know they're visually impaired, doesn't bother them yet. Okay? But mom and dad are pretty freaked out. Why? Well, it's not a life-threatening condition. Who wants a baby that isn't perfect? Physically, right? You'd have to be nuts, right? Okay? And so it's not what you were hoping for. There's something that, and it's something, by the way, that parents can't fix. By the way, for those of you, who have the disability and your parents act weird sometimes, it's because they always want to be able to fix it. They want to be able to make it better, and it makes them crazy that they can't. Why? Because they love you. That's the way that works. As you get older and have children of your own, you'll understand that you want to be able to fix everything for your kids. Anything that makes them unhappy, anything that bothers them, you want to make better. Because you're not nuts, but you can't, and so this shock comes. Now, those of us who have the disability, we get the shock, the social shock, we get that as we begin to emerge out in the world, right? I can remember my first shocking experience as a visually impaired kid in the yard with my sister. Okay, she was 2 years younger than me, which meant she was about 5 and I was about 7, and she wanted to play catch, and I was her big brother, and I was going to play catch with her, and I'd throw the ball to her nice and easy because she was a little kid, and she'd catch it, and she'd throw it back to me, and it would go boink, boink. Okay, because I couldn't see it. And I couldn't figure out why she could catch the ball and I couldn't. Had no idea. Why? Because I didn't know that I was visually impaired, and it was shocking. Now, we also can have these kinds of shocking experiences throughout life. Every time we have an experience like that one. For example, as I got older, I was blessed. I lived in a neighborhood where there was just enough kids to play a game of baseball if nobody was sick or being punished. But it meant that me and my developmentally disabled sister had to be able to play. So they needed us. We had to be able to play. Well, my sister's developmentally disabled, but she's a great athlete. Okay, I had to buy her a trophy case for all her Special Olympic trophies. She's the family jock, and she's really good. Okay, I wanted to be able to play baseball, so they tried me out at various positions. Catcher, not so good. First base, the other team got a lot of men on. Okay, outfield, total loss. What they discovered, though, is if the catcher banged his mitt and talked to me, I could pitch. We didn't call balls and strikes. You just got 4 swings and you were out if you didn't hit something. This is Sandlot, right? Now, we then, not having an adaptive phys ed program, figured out, okay, problems just emerged, right? For example, do you know what a line drive is? That's what a line drive is. Oh! So I had to wear the catcher's equipment. Then I got hit and broke my nose, so I had to wear the catcher's mask. It was really interesting to see a kid in a catcher's outfit pitching. It was very wild, okay? But I got to play. Also, I had seen John Wayne Moore movies. I would pitch the ball and hit the dirt. Just drop onto my face and pray nothing bad happened. My grandmother could not figure out for years why I was the dirtiest kid in the playground. I was like Pigpen, okay? But what was shocking was when all my friends went to sign up for Little League Baseball and I went too. And the man said, "You can't play ball." And I said, "Yes, I can. Let me just tell you how." And I couldn't get him to go for it. And of course, in those days, those were the days when if you wanted to be a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout, you couldn't be because you were disabled. They didn't take disabled kids then. They've gotten smart in their old age, thanks be to God. By the way, when my son was 8, I earned my Bobcat badge. Because I got to be a Cub Scout leader, because they needed a man, by the way. Women couldn't do it, okay? And I could run a meeting, and what we discovered, looking in the book, Bobcat was the only Cub Scout badge that there wasn't an upper age limit for. So I am the oldest Bobcat in the Cub Scouts in the United States ever. I hold that with great pride. I made them pin it on my shoulder. Now, of course, things are a little bit different. So initially, there are these shocking experiences, sometimes in the family, okay? Shock in the larger family, grandma, grandpa, Uncle Sal, okay? Oh my God, what's going on? Is everything okay? What are we going to do? The second phase is often that kind of denial. This can't be happening. It's not good. It's not right. Parents take children from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor. Okay, where are you going next week? There's this doctor in Bogota. Okay, and he has rare herbs that will cure everything. Why? Not because we're crazy, but because we love our kids. Okay. There are various forms of denial. There can be absolute. No, my father. Nothing wrong with him. He's just a little nearsighted. I told you what my visual acuity was. I was not just a little nearsighted. Okay? I wasn't properly diagnosed till I was 10. It was a form of denial, okay? Kids and adults sometimes try to pass, try to be a mulatto, okay? Try to pass for a sighted person, which actually sometimes is pretty comical. With low vision folks like us, we can get away with it some of the time, okay? But then there are those pesky little details. Okay, like the day, for example, that I walked into the ladies' room at the Port Authority bus terminal in New York City. Okay, thank God it was the Port Authority bus terminal in New York City. Nobody noticed. Okay, or the day I was standing with my wife in the supermarket with my arm around her, and I said, "Baby, I'll be right back. I want to get some pickles." Come back, put my arm around the woman in the tan raincoat and the jeans that was not my wife, and said, "What are we having for dinner?" And she said, "I don't know. What makes you think you're eating at my house?" And my wife was just standing out of my visual range, which, by the way, is not that far, laughing herself silly. She said, "I wanted to see how you're going to get out of that one." I was never so glad to have a white cane in my hand in my life. Or the day I was waiting to be picked up to say Mass at church at St. Paul's, and a car pulled up in front of my house. Engine was running. Nobody got out. ran down, jumped in the car, and it was a nurse going to work at Holy Name for the first day, which is the hospital next door to me. I had some pretty cool explaining to do about that one. I'm glad I had a collar on. She wasn't too wigged out by that. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that happen. Denial is a defense mechanism that's supposed to give us the ability to digest things slowly, right? Oh no, we say when somebody died. Oh no, we say. Well, yeah. We say, oh no, it's like a freeze frame. Stop. Give me a chance to take this in a way that I can manage it. Okay? It still happened to me yesterday. I was standing up here, you know, blithering on about something with some nice people like you, and I was thirsty. It was late in the afternoon. I picked up the water, and instead of doing what I was trained to do, which is to excuse myself for a moment and stop, right? Because visually impaired men pouring clear liquid is not an easy task. I hung my thumb over the edge of the cup, poured it all over my shirt and all over my trousers. Now, 20 years ago, I would have been upset for 3 days. Okay? Now, I don't care that much. It's the great part about getting old. You just don't have to care that much. You can just take things the way they are. Now, some things frequently happen to those of us who are visually impaired. We can feel lots of different emotions. There are 3 that are sometimes characteristic in response to situations where our visual impairment gives us a problem. And those 3 emotions can be anxiety, depression, and anger. Okay? Sometimes, by the way, you get the trifecta. You get them all at once. Okay? Somebody knows. Okay. That's when we're really fun to be around. Okay?
It's on my husband.
Yes, ma'am. Okay? Now, anxiety comes when we experience ourselves at risk, right? When you're visually impaired, when are you at risk? Much of the time. Okay? Much of the time, things are risky. Going up and down stairs. Oh, crossing the street. That's wonderful. If I ever tried to go to my bank by getting deeply in touch with my feelings, when I crossed that intersection, I would go home and never make another bank deposit as long as I live, because it's a crazy street. Okay? Lots of things to be anxious about. We become hypervigilant. Also, by the way, we have to listen and we have to use our other senses. By the way, we don't tell you sighted people. By the way, folks, can I tell sighted people some stuff that we don't usually tell them? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. You don't know the secret handshake. We don't usually tell you this. You know how sometimes people, oh, you heard my footsteps. Oh, you recognized my walk. How swell. Sometimes that happens, but mostly we smell you. Now, we're trained never to tell sighted people that we smell them because they think that means that they smell bad, which you don't mostly. But everybody's got a wardrobe of scents, soaps, hairspray, personal odor. That's not bad, but it's part of how we function. I know where to make the left-hand turn to go home because I can smell the pizza shop on the corner. Can't read the sign, but I can smell the pizza shop. We use all of our senses. It's not all hearing, by the way. We just fake it that way because the other ones sometimes make people nervous. Okay? And so in this adjustment process, we can sometimes feel intense anxiety. Okay, I'm a very competent traveler, and I was anxious about coming to this conference because I've never been to Las Vegas. It's not an airport I'm used to going to, right? People were very nice. I know how to get assistance, but I needed to take a little nap when I got here because I was on overload, okay? I was using all my senses. In fact, the other night, I got lost in the casino. Oh, that's a wonderful place for mobility training. Lights flashing. Oh, my seizure disorder. Oh, that's going to work. How wonderful, right? And by the way, this hotel's all in circles.
Oh, it's horrible.
By the way, the staff was very well trained, I think, around here. Well, my wife said, by the way, before we came, my wife, she's a special ed teacher. I'm her oldest student. She said, let's see, it's a conference on albinism being given in the desert in July. Who planned this?
With the pool not open at night.
Right, with the pool.
That's the other one.
Yeah, that's true. But I've noticed that the staff here has been, at least for me, they've been very well trained. Whoever trained them did a really good job. I'm very pleased. I'm going to say something to the manager, okay? Because it's helped reduce my anxiety. Second thing, sometimes depression. When do we feel depressed? We feel depressed when we're disappointed or we have a sense of loss, okay? think about what you don't get when you don't see so well. Think about a kid going into class and it's November. It's right before Thanksgiving, right? And on the bulletin boards, there are people in foofy hats and funny-looking guns and buckles on their shoes, turkeys. Nobody said a word, but the lesson on Thanksgiving has already begun, right? For a visually impaired person, maybe you get the colors. Maybe you get some of the shapes. But unless somebody actually tells you what's going on, or if you're willing to go up against the wall like this and look sideways, you can get some of it one piece at a time, okay? There are things that we can't do. I felt very sad when I couldn't play Little League with my friends. I felt very sad when I couldn't be a Cub Scout, okay? Those things made me very sad. When my friends got in their cars and drove away, some of them never to return, when I was an adolescent, this was a very difficult thing. It made me sad. It was a struggle, okay? People who study human interactions determine that about 80% of interpersonal communication is nonverbal, which is to say visual, okay? Now imagine somebody with my visual acuity trying to flirt. Yeah, it's pretty funny, I'll have to tell you. When I was in high school, I had a crush on Rosalie Gladstone like there was no tomorrow. She was a cheerleader, she was cute, she was a year older than me. I used to hide behind my father's car just so I could, by accident, be walking out when she was going to school so we could walk together. I never had the nerve to ask her out. True story, my 25th high school reunion. We're dancing on the dance floor, we're chatting. And she says to me, you know, I always meant to ask you. I had a wicked crush on you when I was in high school. And I wanted you to ask me out so bad. Now, this was the early 60s, okay? This is before women asked men out, you understand? What women had to do was send you signals that they would say yes if you asked. But they couldn't be big signals because then they'd feel cheap. Okay? So they had to be subtle signals. And I used to bat my eyelashes at you and wiggle my hips. I said, could you have sent me a note? Could you have said something? Dear God, woman, I wanted to go out with you. You know, I said, I'd have to have a note, but, give me a break. And we laughed about it. But I thought to myself, now there was an opportunity that I, just went by. It's okay. Am I going to live? Am I going to survive? Sure, that's fine. But I experienced a sense of loss, and sometimes that sense of loss can lead to a sense of sadness or depression when we're frankly discriminated against sometimes. The unemployment statistics for visually impaired and blind people in the United States are awful. Blind and visually impaired humans in the U.S. between the ages of 18 and 65 have an unemployment rate of 80%. 8-0. Okay, at least 10 times higher or more than in the general population. That's a real problem. Now, by the way, that's an improvement. The last time they took the statistics 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was 87%. So we're doing a little better. This is good. Computers are helping. Okay? So we often have experiences of sadness and depression, of loss. I have a little granddaughter who's going to be 2. And, every week they send pictures on the computer, and that's no good to me. You know what I mean? I'm going to go see her in the summertime, but I only have the memory of what she looked like last time around, And I can show you a picture of her in my cell phone, but I can't see it. Am I going to die? No, but that's kind of sad, right? Anger, oh yes, anger, burning bright in the sinews of the night. If you know the Rudyard Kipling poem, okay? When you're visually impaired, life has endless frustrations. You're missing a step, you're missing a beat, you're missing a last digit of a phone number, right? Things are just incomplete, okay? You get them partially, all the time. Just partially, that's what it means to be partially sighted. And sometimes that just becomes overwhelmingly frustrating. If you're a parent of a visually impaired kid and you want to know how frustrated they get going to school in the morning, I can tell you how to do it. If you want to have a sense of what it feels like to be them in the world, if you are right-handed, all morning do everything with your left hand. And if you're left-handed, do everything with your right hand. In other words, use your non-dominant hand to do all the tasks that you do in that morning. And then notice at noon how you feel. Okay? You can even imagine it now. That's how your kid can feel almost every day, almost all the time. Why? Because ordinary stuff is just harder. Okay? It's just more difficult, it takes more time, it takes adaptation, blah, 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 blah. It's not bad, doesn't mean you can't do it, doesn't mean you can't deal with it. I tell kids and adults who are visually impaired, you're a person who is always going to have a second job. Your first job is going to be living your life, and your second job is going to be managing living your life. And you can do it, and it can be fine. I'm grateful for my life. I love my life. I'm happy as a clam in a mud bank, and there are days when I just want to scream. Okay? My particular nemesis is even with JAWS and all the adaptive technology, when I'm sitting there trying to do something with the computer, and I know that if I could see there's some little something on that screen that would tell me what was wrong, and I can't get JAWS to read it. And you can hear my voice go up even as I talk about it. My wife's wondering if she'll knock on the door. Excuse me, Father? Father, are we having trouble with the computer because I'm using language that Father shouldn't use? Okay? That's what Father is doing at the top of Father's lungs, okay? Because of the frustration, and it can just make you mad. And then of course, there are the stupid people in the world, right, who tease you, make fun of you, give you a hard time. You know, I mean, you got to be a real lowlife to kind of, you know, even the Bible says, you know, put stumbling blocks before the blind or visually impaired, but there are people who do it, and it just makes you want to smack them. The problem is you usually can't find them. Okay? It's one of the reasons I started studying. I've been studying the martial arts for 30 years, and I thought, you know, and I started lifting weights. You wouldn't know it now. I had to give the weights up years ago because of my arthritis. But my wife said, are you trying to be a bodybuilder? And I said, no. I said, I'm only going to be able, if I find somebody, I'll be able to hit them once and that's it. I'll never find them again. You know, I want them to stay down when I can do it. So it's not uncommon to see these emotions of anxiety, some depression, and some anger. So again, not everybody all the time, but some of us much of the time, okay? And so it's something that we have to use and learn to use in our adjustment. Now, this is a cycle. Remember that spiral staircase? Each time we have one of these experiences, often you feel frustrated, you want to give up, you want to quit, it's too hard, I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. And then something interesting happens for most of us. You have somebody who loves you, who just sits and listens to you and lets you kind of get it off your chest, right? Or sometimes boredom is a great help, okay? You just say, I'm not doing any of that anymore, and then 4 days later you're tired of listening to the reruns of I Love Lucy. Okay, you just get bored. Boredom can be a great thing in that regard. And then you begin to reassess. It's a phase when you think, okay, this is not that bad. I can figure out a way to do this. It's going to be okay. Let me figure out a way to cope. Let me figure out a way to strategize. Again, often with family and friends. And now you're on your way back up through the cycle, okay? And that's when you get mobilized. That's the next step. When you mobilize means you start to move. You start to do something. And this is the process that people go through in one way or another as they adjust to significant vision loss. Now, it happens over and over again as we move through life, as we move through different levels of life. As you become competent in one setting in life, for example, and then you move to another setting. Okay? I was a reasonably competent college student. I didn't do very well academically because they didn't, remember, I'm old enough where there was no, when I went to college, there was no such thing as a cassette, the things they're now phasing out. Okay, that's how old I am. I used to have to hire people to read to me or get volunteers. Actually, I thought it was the New York Commission for the Blind's way of getting me a date. No, because I always asked the prettiest girls in all my classes if they'd mind reading to me. By the time I was a sophomore, it occurred to me that they actually should be reading something, and then my grades started to improve, so that was good. My social life was pretty good the first year, but the grades needed to go up a little bit. But this is what people experience. But then I became a young husband and a young father. Should have seen when they put an infant in my hands, right? How am I going to deal with this infant? Now, thank God my father had been remarried when I was an adolescent because I was used to diapering. And by the way, these were in the days before there were Pampers. These were the old cloth diapers and the pins that were that big. I'd be changing my son's diaper, my wife would go by and she'd go over and kiss him on the forehead and she'd say, if you knew how blind your daddy was, you'd be crying louder than that. when the child gets a little bit older and you do that, you throw them up in the air and catch them thing, wee, wee, and she'd go by and she'd say, when he gets older, he's going to need psychiatric care. When he thinks about, when he sees these pictures, he's just going to be in trouble, okay? Also, in the albinism community, folks present as appearing differently, okay? And that can be a real hassle as well. I don't know why, but we human beings track for difference. I think it's a protective device that we have. Children can be particularly cruel in this regard, although adults sometimes can match it. And so we have to find ways to present ourselves that we can be comfortable with and that we can enjoy. Adjustment is a lifelong process. Adjustment is a way of figuring out how to compensate and how to adapt to the situations in which we find ourselves. And vision loss, remember, think of what vision does. One, vision is the sense that we use to validate our other senses, isn't it? If we heard somebody kick something over, a dustpan or something in the back of the room, we don't know what it is by the sound. But if you wanted to be certain, what would you do? Turn and look, right. We say, what is believing? Seeing is believing. True? Okay? If you get called into court and you heard the whole thing, nobody cares. They want an eyewitness. Okay? They want somebody who saw the whole deal. So vision is the sense that we use to validate our other senses. Those of us who are visually impaired are unable to do that kind of an accurate validation. Any of you who've been around me, you'll hear me say often, who's there? You'll come up and say, hi, okay, who's there? Who's there? It's my most frequent question, because I can't tell. Okay? I can't tell. Now, if you get to know me well enough, but I swear if my wife walked in the back door, I wouldn't be expecting her in Las Vegas. She's supposed to be in New Jersey. I wouldn't recognize her till she spoke to me. Okay? Vision is also the sense that we use to get information very rapidly, instantaneously at a glance. People look around, right? When you're visually impaired, you have to look at things one at a time. And often that has to be mediated by language, doesn't it? Somebody has to tell you what's going on with it, okay? I thought to myself, I brought $100 to lose in the casino. I haven't been in there once. I mean, I've been through it. Why? Because I can't figure out how to use those machines. And they won't let me play poker or blackjack because I can't do it fast enough. Okay, so that's $100 I'll go home with. I've been trying to eat it, actually. If you can't lose it, eat it. That's my thought. Okay? So when vision is impaired, lots of things happen. Transportation is a problem. Not being able to drive in our culture is a real problem. Because I live in a place where the public transportation is actually really good. And it's still a bear to get around. It's still something you have to plan for endlessly. Where am I going to live? I picked the house I chose to live in with my family because it's between 3 bus routes. It's a nice house. I like it. But one of the main reasons I picked it was where it is. When my wife gets too old to drive, we're 60, when we're 70 or 80, she can't drive anymore, we may move into New York City. As crazy as that sounds, because there are taxis and public transportation. And even 6 miles outside of New York, if we can't get around in a car, we've got a real dilemma. Okay, how much time do I have left? I can't see this thing anymore.
About 20 minutes.
Great, okay. I've been running my mouth for a while. Now, I'd be really interested. Questions. I really want our time together to be helpful to you, not just me spouting off. So, did your friend send you in with a question? Do you have an observation? Yes?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about the anxiety, the depression, the anger, we have a 7-year-old boy with albinism. And I know it's going to be particular to him, but what is your suggestion in helping him through this, helping him navigate these steps?
Okay. Let me enunciate a couple of principles, okay? And then you'll have to sort of tailor them, okay? The principle with those kinds of emotions is, 1, validate the emotional experience. If you're anxious, if you're angry, if you feel sad, that's just what it is, right? So that's okay. You validate the emotion and you moderate the behavior. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit your sister. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to decapitate the cat. Okay? It's okay to be sad, but it's not okay to break all your toys. Okay? So the feeling is okay. Now, by the way, there's a third step. It's okay to feel this way. It's not okay to do this behavior, but here are some behaviors that would be okay. All right? In other words, we tell children all the time, be nice. Well, what happens when you don't feel nice? Right? In other words, if anger is a legitimate emotion, every family has to figure out, parents have to figure out, what is a legitimate way to express anger in this family. Okay? And again, you understand, so you and your husband or your partner, you need to have some conversations about this, okay? Because what's okay in one family may not be okay with another. Now, the rules I recommend, okay, no physical violence against persons unless you are under an immediate attack. Okay? Although that changes a little bit as you get older. Okay? Sometimes, my grandfather told me that sometimes a gentleman just needs to ask another gentleman to step outside. And you better be ready to do what you do when you go outside, but sometimes I'm a little old-fashioned that way. Not much, but sometimes that has to happen. You can't hit. Okay? You can't curse or scream at people. Those are rules that I recommend. What can't you do? But then you have to say, what can you do? Okay? So you may need to teach a child what's an okay angry voice. Okay? What's okay? Because you know why? I'm very angry, Mother. I'm so upset. That just doesn't cut it. Okay? Now, by the way, we had a rule in my house. Nobody yelled at other human beings. Nobody cursed at other human beings. My house, you're not allowed to curse till you're 18. Then it's up to you. You're allowed to yell at objects. Okay? You're allowed to yell at the wall. You're allowed to look up to the ceiling and scream, I hate this! That you can do. That may not be a rule in your family. Well, it was a rule in mine, okay? It doesn't have to be a rule in yours, but the child has to be able to do something, okay? As a karate student, one of the things I loved, I'd have some of these frustrating experiences. Man, there is nothing like beating the snot out of a 75-pound punching bag until you can't move your arms. It's a wonderful experience. Now, it's too big a bag for a little kid. Something maybe. I don't know what, physical activity, anger needs to be burned off, anxiety needs to be burned off. What are acceptable ways to do it? Now, by the way, my grandfather had a theory, too, that when children misbehave, it's because they don't have enough work to do. That was my grandfather's theory, because there was always more work in the house than the adults could do. So if you were misbehaving in some way, it was clear to him you needed a job. And that job mostly, involved physical activity. I don't know whether it predated Cool Hand Luke, the movie, or not. I don't know whether he got it from the movie or the movie got it from him. But I remember once he was so mad he went out in the backyard and he just dug a hole and filled it in again. Because he just needed to do something to work off the anger. So, you validate the emotion. You restrict the expressions of that emotion that are not appropriate, but then you got to give the kid some way that can be okay with you. Now, here's a way to figure out what's okay with you. If it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, but not too much. If it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, it's probably intense enough to be okay with the kid. But not too uncomfortable, okay? And these are also there. So that would be the line of thinking that I would suggest. Okay, I don't know if that's helpful or not. I hope it is a little bit.
Our son, he'll come to us. Something will happen, and he usually comes to us a couple days later. He's a real digester.
Good.
And when he has said things to me, I do that. I say, that really, S-U-C-K. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. That's awful. And I try to go there with him, and then he doesn't seem to be taking that next step, and I guess that's
his age.
It out to me.
Yeah.
Should I help him? Should we present? Would you feel better if we?
First thing, before you do that, that's okay. But first thing I would do next is say, so is there anything you think you want to do about that? Is there anything you think you need to do or say about that? Sometimes just coming to you and tell you will be enough. Okay? You guys really have a lot of power in your children's lives, and thank God they're coming and telling you. Whether it's right away or a couple of days later, that's a great thing. But Okay, but first thing is always inquire. Adults forget to talk to kids. And by the way, children lose the ability to listen. Mostly when adults ask questions of children, they're not really interested in the answer. They already know it. It's an interrogation. What were you doing? Well, you know, or you wouldn't be asking in that tone of voice, right? You know, where's your sister? Where's that toy? Did you do your homework? No parent in the world has ever asked, did you do your homework of a kid that they were pretty sure did, right? Kids are used to being interrogated by adults. I would encourage you to, now you have to do some of that. I'm not ragging on that. You have to do that. But also sometimes, even though they may be a little curious at the idea, just be inquisitive, right? So how did that feel? Oh, it felt pretty crummy. Okay, so what do you think you want to do? Is there anything you need to say to anybody about that? Anything you need to do about that? Anything you want me to do about it? You know, what do you think? Even really little kids, okay? You know? Now, and then if they you know, well, I want to go and, you know, set their house on fire, you know. I said, well, that's an interesting idea. That probably would be a problem, but I can sure understand the thought. Anything else? You see what I mean? Okay, and then if there's something they want to do, sometimes your child, I'm sorry dear, really will say to you, you know, well, can you help? You know, you say, well, I can talk to the teacher, or I can do this, or I can do that. Okay, right, check it out. Now, you always have to help if, you know, somebody's beating them up or abusing them in some way. I mean, then you need to step in. You know, pretty much doesn't matter how old they are. But those are the kinds of things that I would try. I would inquire first. Before you get to the would it help if you, okay, that's the next step and that's good. But before you do that, I encourage you to take a break, either a little break or a big break. Why? Because you want to model something for your child. You want to model thinking it over, okay? And you've got a thinker on your hands, so he already starts to know how to do that. So you say, you know, let me think of, you know, would you like me to, you want some help with that? Yeah. Okay, you know what? Why don't you go play for a half hour? I need to think about it. Even if you actually don't need the half hour. It's a great modeling. And then you come back and say, well, I've thought about it, and well, you know, here a person could do this, a person could do that, you know, what do you think? Now here's the interesting thing. Some things the kids will want to do, and then you can coach them. Then you're a coach. You can help them do it by coaching them. What? Sorry, Lord. You can coach them in athletics, you know, in that same way. Sometimes a kid actually doesn't need to do it. They just need to know that there's something that they could do. Sometimes that's actually enough, okay? But that's the way I would approach that kind of thing. Other questions, please. How can I help you?
Is that also following the thought of your other, I was at one of your other sessions, you were talking about dropping the thought?
Yes.
It's the same theory, right?
Yes, same theory as dropping a thought. Dropping a thought is have you ever heard your kids saying something that all of a sudden you realize you don't want them to say, but that you say all the time? Okay, so we know how that works, right? That they are listening even when they're pretending they're not. So sometimes the idea of dropping a thought is just, you know, putting out an idea almost like you were talking to the sky. Not to them, just and just see whether or not they run with it. See the ones they pick up. See the ones that they find useful, okay? That can be that works really well often with adolescents. Remember, for some adolescents, anything that comes from mom and dad is not good. It's amazing. What is it Mark Twain said? That when he was 16 years old, he just couldn't believe how dumb his father was. And it was amazing to him how much that man had learned by the time he turned 21. No, what happens with teenagers is they're growing, right? But that's not how they experience themselves. They experience it as you shrinking, right? And all of a sudden, they can't imagine why they thought you were so smart and why they were so afraid of you, and right? Well, okay, it's natural, it's a part of what goes on. And so sometimes you have to be direct and in your face, but often you can make a lot of mileage by just throwing ideas out into the universe. And by the way, if they pick one of them, come up and come back to you with it, don't take credit for it. Look them in the eye and say, wow, that was really smart. I'm glad you thought of that. Why? Because you already know you're smart, and they need the practice. Okay? Other questions, please. What's on your mind?
How do you teach them about body language?
Body language. Okay, that's a real tough one to learn when you don't get the... Remember, sighted people get feedback all the time, whether they want it or not, as long as your eyes are open. Okay? Most, I don't mean to be crude, sorry, video camera, most children stop picking their nose, not because mom or dad or grandma told them to, but because they do it once, and then they look at the kids across the room making faces at them, and then they don't do it anymore, right? So, with body language, what you need to do is model and instruct, okay? Model and instruct, okay? Model would be noticing how a kid is using their body, okay? And then instruct them as often as possible in a non-punitive way. So, the 4-year-old, my stepsister did this, my half-sister did this once. The little 4.5-year-old girl comes, we're getting ready for a family party, and she comes running downstairs, naked as the day she was born, right? Carrying 2 little outfits. Mommy, which one should I wear? Right? Now, my stepmother was not always good on her game, but this time she was. She didn't scream at the child, okay? She said, oh, I think the pink one would be lovely, honey. Okay? By the way, next time call mommy and mommy will come upstairs, okay? That's how we handle that kind of thing, right? Okay, or at least that's how we should, some variety of that, okay? Sometimes direct instruction, okay, can be very useful. Look at me, you say to the kid. Look what I'm doing, stand close, look what I'm doing with my body, okay? What do you think that says? What do you think that means? Okay? Start with big gestures. Okay? Wait, why? Because we can't see the little ones, okay? Right? And then instruct, okay? You know, honey, you're wearing a dress, you have to sit with your legs together. Thank you. Okay, that's what we do, okay? It's hard for us to realize that other people are looking at us. We know it theoretically, but we don't see them doing it, okay? And so it's a little bit weird. I like to start with sort of rote things, okay? I'm very old-fashioned this way. People make fun of me, I know, okay? But when my children were little, okay, they called every woman ma'am, and they called every man sir, okay? When they got to be about 10 years old, and the social climate started to change, what's your name, sir?
Kit.
Kit. If I introduced you to my 10-year-old, I would say, this is David. What would you like David to call you? Right? Dealer's choice. And whatever you said, that's what he had to call you. Okay? Clothing also goes along with body language, doesn't it? Okay? Helping kids to know and to see what's appropriate. Now, particularly with teenagers, by the way, if you're going to dress your kids, you don't have to spend loads of money, and you don't have to, follow every stupid fad, but get them at least some clothes that are cool. Okay? Anything grandma would approve of is something they should not wear to school. Okay? That's a pretty good rule of thumb. If grandma thought they looked really great, don't send them among their peers. You can have a couple of grandma outfits that you wear to grandmas. Okay? But that's not a good thing. Okay? And sometimes just basically instructing them, are you, and by the way, my instructions, I don't believe, I have a rule, and I commend it to you. I accept no criticism from anybody unless that criticism has been preceded by respectful inquiry. And I do not criticize another unless I have preceded that criticism with respectful inquiry. Okay? So you see a kid, standing or sitting in some way that's not appropriate. Say to them, are you doing that for some special reason? Because they may have one, by the way. No, we went through a whole thing upstairs when I was with the kids today. I adapted a position that was good for me, and they were all going, close the blinds, I can't see anything, it hurts, close the blind, right? There was one kid all scrunched up on the couch, And nobody, thank God, nobody was trying to discipline him because he was fine. I knew what he was doing. He was scunching down so he could get his hand like this so the glare wasn't coming in from the window to hurt his eyes. Okay? So I didn't care. I didn't feel like he was disrespecting me. Now, if I had been in a situation where he needed to do that, I might have said to him, are you got your arm like that so that the glare bothers you? Then let's move you. Or let's fix the glare. Okay? Because that's not going to work in this situation. I like telling kids sometimes this is not going to work in this context. Because things are contextual, right? It's okay to be naked taking a shower. It's not okay to be naked going out on the front lawn for the paper. So helping them learn the context, right? What's okay to wear to grandma's house may not be what you want to wear when you're out with your friends, okay? Even though there are going to be realistic limits then, okay? That would be the best thing that I would try, okay? Model and inquire and instruct. Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Well, folks, if there are no more questions, we're a couple of minutes early, but I'm done. I'm sorry. I allow a certain amount of time I think we're going to use for question and answer. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to hang out with you guys, I really must say, and particularly for you parents. If any of you would consider adopting a slightly older child, I would clean my room and not ask for much allowance, because you seem like pretty nice people to me. So thank you. You're welcome.
Him or her is that NOAA is an organization that lets kids or adults with albinism to meet other people with albinism, and that we get to go to many exotic places, and it's awesome, especially the bull.
I'm over to see my friends, everybody that I share this with, that's where I'm from. It's only me with albinism. I feel left out. It's hard.
Not being the only albino person, there are so many other people, and I don't feel left out and all that stuff.
I'm just gonna say, don't be ashamed to get a pose or something, and do what you need to do to see stuff and things like that. Because it'll really help. It'll really help you, and if you take time to do these things, you might get a head start from regular people.
Yeah, go to NOAA. It's if you're feeling left out, go to NOAA, because there are other people who have albinism. You wouldn't feel left out. You can share experiences. Yeah.
No, I felt left out, and I found out about NOAA, so I feel
Just seeing other people, because this is the first time I saw other people with albinism, and just what they're like.
And my friends that are albino over there, I get to reconnect with them every 2 years. And I just like to socialize and meet other people and discuss what they
I'm having a lot of fun. It's pretty cool because my brother has albinism also, but he's 11 and I'm 14, so I wanted to see people my own age. I certainly do. There's a whole bunch of people walking around. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of cool. Me too. I really want to drive, so I really want to get information about that too. And then just jobs and college and yeah.
All you kids with albinism out there, and for everybody, just want you to understand that it's a great thing. Not a disease, great thing.
Yeah, people saying it's contagious, it's not. It's not a contagious, horrible disease. It's awesome.
I'm harmless. I don't bite hard.
Oh yeah,
Don't bite much.
And for those of you who think that we're freaks, we're not.